What if I told you that the mighty Roman Empire wasn't fueled by gold, gladiators, or grand feasts, but by porridge, pickles, and fish sauce? Forget everything you thought you knew about Rome and food. Behind every marble statue, every conquering legion was a bowl of barley mush and a jug of olive oil. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't Instagrammable, but it worked and it built an empire. Because while modern menus chased truffle foam and imported caviar, the Romans were turning lentils into strategy, cheese into survival, and garum. Yes, that infamous fermented fish sauce into a global export. So how did they do it? In this video, we're not just tasting ancient recipes. We're traveling back to the kitchens of commoners, the mess kits of marching soldiers, and the decadent platters of emperors with gout. We'll see how Rome ate, survived, and ruled, one humble ingredient at a time. Let's eat our way through the weird, brilliant, and surprisingly relatable world of ancient Roman cuisine. Picture a Roman feast and your mind conjures opulence. Golden trays heavy with glistening grapes, a crackling wild boar roasted whole, wine spilling from jeweled goblets in echoing marble halls. It's a scene of decadence, a banquet fit for emperors. But hold that image, it's a glittering mirage, a tale spun by poets and painters. The real Roman table, it's far humbler, far grittier, and infinitely more fascinating. For most Romans, think weathered soldiers, toiling servants, or bustling shopkeepers, meals were not spectacles but lifelines. Their food was forged in the crucible of necessity, not luxury. Forget refined sugar, tomatoes, pasta, or even the tart zing of lemons. These were centuries away. Instead, Romans built their cuisine from the raw materials of their world. Hearty grains, earthy legumes, sun-dried fruits, golden oils, and pungent fermented sauces that carried the tang of the sea. These were the flavors of survival, the fuel of an empire that stretched from Britannia's mists to Egypt's sands. This was no mere sustenance, it was strategy. Roman food was as portable as a legion's march, as preservable as a tax collector's ledger, and as powerful as the roads that bound the empire. Every bite reflected Rome itself. Pragmatic, disciplined, and meticulously ordered. Meals were rituals, woven with symbolism and subtle cues of status. A crust of barley bread for a laborer, a delicate fig for a senator, each morsel told a story of class and conquest. Yes, the elite might have savored the occasional extravagance, plump dormice stuffed with herbs or peacock tongues drizzled with honey. But these were rare indulgences, not the pulse of Rome's culinary heart. The true story lies in the ingenuity of the everyday. How a soldier's ration of spelt porridge powered a siege, how a merchant's jar of fish sauce carried the taste of home across oceans, how a farmer's lentils stretched to feed a family through winter. This is the cuisine that built an empire, not with decadence but with resilience. As a historian, I find myself captivated not by the lavish feasts of the Palatine Hill, but by the quiet brilliance of the common Roman's table. There's something thrilling in imagining a legionary, dust-covered and weary, savoring a scrap of dried fruit under a foreign sky, or a matron in a cramped insula blending oil and herbs to transform stale bread into a meal. These are the unsung heroes of Rome's story, not the emperors, but the cooks, the traders, the farmers who turned scarcity into strength. So let us set aside the cinematic myths of Hollywood's Rome. Pull up a stool to the real Roman table, where every dish whispers of grit, glory, and genius. What follows is no mere menu, it's a journey into the soul of a civilization. Stay with me, and I promise you'll never see the eternal city the same way again. Imagine setting out to conquer the world, sword in hand, armor gleaming, the fate of empires on your shoulders, with nothing but a humble bowl of barley porridge to fuel you. This was the reality of the Roman soldier, and that porridge, known as pools, was no mere meal. It was the heartbeat of Rome's relentless endurance, a dish as unyielding as the legions themselves. Pools was simplicity itself. Barley or farro boiled in water until thick, perhaps enlivened with a drizzle of olive oil, a pinch of wild herbs, or on a fortunate day, a scattering of sharp cheese. Bland, perhaps to our modern palates. But to the Romans, it was ubiquitous, indispensable, a culinary constant that bound the empire together. From the smoky cookfires of military camps to the cramped hearths of tenement kitchens, pools nourished Rome's soul. Legionnaires slung sacks of grain on their backs, ready to whip up pools amid the chaos of campaign. Farmers, their hands calloused from the plow, broke their fast with it before dawn. Even senators, in moments of calculated humility, spooned it down, claiming kinship with the stoic virtues of their ancestors. Pools was Rome's great equalizer, cheap, filling, and as practical as a well-laid road. Whether cooked over a crackling fire or in the stifling confines of an urban insula, it was the food of the people, from the lowliest laborer to the loftiest orator. Why porridge, you ask? Because it was a triumph of function over form. A single bowl delivered the carbohydrates and fiber needed to power a day's grueling work. Be it hacking through the forests of Gaul, paving the Appian Way, or sparring in the forum's verbal arenas. It was gentle on the stomach, endlessly adaptable, and above all sustainable. In a world without refrigeration or global supply chains, pools was a miracle of pragmatism, a dish that could be made anywhere, anytime, with whatever grain was at hand. To me, as a historian, pools is more than food. It's a window into Rome's genius for endurance. I imagine a centurion, his face lined with the dust of 1,000 marches, savoring a steaming bowl under a starlit sky, or a mother in a bustling Roman tenement, stirring a pot to feed her children on pennies. There's a quiet poetry in its simplicity, a defiance in its modesty. This was Rome's first power food, the original superfood, long before kale smoothies or quinoa bowls. Today, some clever marketer would slap a heritage grain label on it, toss in a few chia seeds, and sell it for $14 a bowl. But back then, it was survival, one determined spoonful at a time. Pools wasn't meant to dazzle the senses. It was meant to forge an empire. In its unassuming grains lies the story of a civilization that thrived not on extravagance but on resilience. So linger with me at this humble table. The tale of pools is only the beginning, a gritty, gripping saga of Rome's unbreakable spirit. Keep listening, and I'll show you how a simple porridge built a world. Picture a world where cheese isn't just a snack but a symbol of empire, a balm for the body, and a badge of status. Long before charcuterie boards and artisanal tastings captivated modern foodies, the ancient Romans were utterly devoted to their dairy. They didn't merely enjoy cheese, they exalted it, crafting it with a fervor that rivaled their conquests. In Rome, cheese was as diverse as the empire itself. Soft and creamy, hard and aged, smoked to a golden hue or spiked with fiery spices, its varieties outnumbered the senators squabbling in the forum. Out in the sun-baked countryside, farmers churned fresh wheels in rustic kitchens, their hands coaxing magic from milk. On the battlefield, grizzled legionaries sliced into dense, salted rounds between clashes, their cheese a steadfast companion through the mud and blood of campaign. And the elite, they elevated humble curds to decadence, blending them with honey, fragrant herbs, or sun-sweet fruit, each bite a testament to their wealth. Enter Pliny the Elder, Rome's own culinary sage and tireless chronicler. With the zeal of a modern food critic, Pliny poured his passion into documenting cheese as if it were fine wine. In his sprawling natural history, he sang the praises of sheep's milk wheels from the misty Alps, rhapsodized over the spiced curds of Campania, and issued stern warnings about cheeses so potent they fought back, their flavors a bold challenge to the unwary palate. To Pliny, cheese wasn't just food, it was a subject worthy of reverence, a craft as intricate as poetry. But cheese in Rome transcended the plate. It was medicine, prescribed by physicians for ailments of the stomach, bouts of melancholy, and even to kindle fertility, a kind of ancient probiotic centuries before science named the gut's mysteries. As a historian, I'm struck by this blend of practicality and superstition. imagining a Roman healer pressing a wedge of cheese into a patient's hand with the gravity of a priest. It's a reminder of how deeply food wove into the fabric of their lives, nourishing both body and belief. And then there was the trade. Roman cheese was a wanderer, traveling farther than many a legion. Packed into amphorae or strapped to creaking ships, great wheels sailed from Britannia's rains to Africa's deserts, their hardy rinds defying time and tide. In an age without refrigeration, this was no small feat. Cheese was a marvel of endurance, its shelf life a quiet boast of Roman ingenuity. It was as much a currency as a calorie, bartered in markets and savored in far-flung outposts. While garum, that infamous fish sauce, stole the spotlight with its pungent bravado, cheese was the empire's unsung hero. Flavorful, versatile, and subtly fashionable, it was more than survival, it was a slice of Rome's soul. From the shepherd's hut to the senator's table, cheese carried stories of craft, conquest, and connection. So linger with me in this dairy-drenched world. The tale of Roman cheese is no mere footnote, it's a rich, tangy saga that begs to be savored to the last crumb. If the Roman Empire had a secret weapon, it wasn't the sharp edge of a gladius, the heady allure of wine, or even the briny kick of garum. It was olive oil, golden, glossy, and woven into the very sinews of civilization. This wasn't mere food, it was the lifeblood of an empire, a liquid so versatile it shaped Rome's kitchens, homes, and conquests. Olive oil was Rome's great multitasker. In bustling kitchens, it worked miracles, sizzling fish to a crisp, preserving vibrant vegetables, dressing sharp greens, or softening a humble bowl of porridge. It swirled into hearty stews, anointed crusty bread, and melded into sauces, lending flavor, texture, and vital calories to a people ever hungry for more. Beyond the hearth, its uses were boundless. Romans cleansed their bodies with it, athletes slathering themselves in its sheen before scraping away dirt and sweat with a strigel's graceful curve, a ritual as practical as it was poetic. It fueled flickering lamps that banished the night, illuminating everything from scholars' scrolls to soldiers' tents. To me, as a historian, there's something almost mythic in its ubiquity, as if olive oil were the ambrosia of Rome's mortal gods. Economically, olive oil was a colossus. Vast estates in Hispania and North Africa bent under the weight of olive groves, their presses churning out rivers of liquid gold. Enormous amphorae, stamped with the marks of their makers, cradled this treasure, sailing across the Mediterranean to every corner of the empire. Archaeologists still trace Rome's trade routes by the shattered husks of these vessels. Each fragment. 6 years had elapsed since the blood of Rome's legions soaked the earth of Teutoburg, but the forest bore the memory as if it were yesterday. Its ancient trees stood sentinel over a wound that time could not heal, their roots entwined with the echoes of a massacre that had shaken an empire. When Germanicus and his legions breached the clearing where that horror had unfolded, a profound silence descended, heavy as the fog that clung to the undergrowth. No soldier spoke, for no words could capture the weight of what lay before them. The ground was a grim tapestry of loss, bones bleached white by relentless seasons, scattered by scavengers and trodden by the indifferent passage of years. The historian Tacitus would later record that the soldiers wept openly, their stoic facades crumbling in the face of such desolation. Skulls pierced by Germanic spears grinned blankly from the earth. Rusted shards of Roman armor, once gleaming with pride, lay mingled with the shattered remnants of shields and the brittle limbs of fallen horses. Most haunting of all were the human heads, long decayed, nailed to the trunks of ancient oaks, unmistakably Roman. Their silent screams a testament to the savagery that had claimed them. For many in Germanicus's ranks, this was no distant tragedy. Fathers, brothers, comrades in arms lay among the ruins, denied the honor of burial, the solace of final rites, their spirits left to wander in this cursed place. Germanicus, his heart as resolute as it was heavy, ordered the army to halt. Then, in a gesture that would echo through the annals of Rome, he knelt upon the hallowed ground. His hands, calloused from war yet gentle in reverence, touched the bones of the fallen, as if to offer them the dignity stolen by their enemies. He commanded his men to gather the remains, no matter how fragmented, no matter how nameless. These were not mere relics. They were the vestiges of Rome's pride, the silent witnesses to an empire's shame. That night, beneath a sky pierced by the flickering glow of torches, a solemn funeral rite unfolded. The bones, collected with care, were interred in a single sacred mound. Germanicus himself placed the first sod of earth, his act a beacon of respect and resolve. One by one, his soldiers followed, each handful of soil a tribute to the fallen, each gesture a vow etched in their souls. The dead would not be forgotten, and their deaths would not go unavenged. The mound rose not merely as a grave, but as a monument, a scar upon the land that mirrored the fire kindling in Roman hearts. It stood as a defiant proclamation that Rome's spirit, though wounded, would never break. In the wake of that night, a transformation swept through the legions. The campaign, once driven by strategy and imperial decree, became a deeply personal crusade. Every step forward was a reckoning, every clash with the enemy a whisper from the dead, urging, "Go on." The soldiers no longer fought for gold or glory alone, but for the brothers whose bones now rested beneath the earth, for the honor that had been stolen in this very forest. Rome had mourned its loss, its tears mingling with the soil of Germania. Now it was time to make others weep, to carve a path of vengeance that would restore the empire's pride and reclaim the eagles that still lay in enemy hands. What lay ahead? A storm of steel and fury as Germanicus led his men deeper into the wilds, where the ghosts of Teutoburg stirred and the fate of Rome hung in the balance. The mound stood as a silent sentinel, a promise that the fallen would be avenged, and the saga of Germanicus was far from over. Each step forward drew the empire closer to a confrontation that would echo through history, a tale of retribution and redemption that demanded to be heard. Germanicus was no Varus, no hapless commander to be ensnared by the wilds of Germania. He had pored over the lessons of Teutoburg, dissecting the terrain, the enemy, and the fatal errors that had cost Rome so dearly. He understood the Germanic strength lay in chaos, ambushes that struck like lightning, traps woven into the very landscape, and a psychological terror that broke men before swords ever met. To defeat them, Germanicus rewrote the rules of war, crafting a campaign as bold as it was brilliant, a testament to Rome's unyielding resolve. Rather than march all 8 legions through the treacherous paths that had doomed his predecessors, he split his forces with surgical precision. Half under the seasoned Caecina carved a relentless path overland through the lands of the Bructeri, their advance a grim promise of Rome's wrath. The other half, led by Germanicus himself, embarked on an audacious gambit, a naval assault via the North Sea. The fleet, a marvel of Roman ingenuity, sliced through the waves, landing deep in enemy territory before the Germans could muster a defense. Like a dagger plunged into unguarded flesh, the legions disembarked and surged inland, catching the tribes in disarray. It was a move that spoke not just of strategy, but of a commander who dared to defy the expected. Yet the Germans were no mere prey to be hunted. Arminius, the cunning architect of Teutoburg's massacre, awaited them at the Visurgis River. He had rallied a coalition of tribes, their forces poised with lethal intent, infantry concealed in the forest's embrace, cavalry lurking for a devastating flank attack. The stage was set for another slaughter, a chance for Arminius to prove Rome's resurgence a fleeting dream. But Germanicus was not a man to be outwitted. A Germanic deserter, swayed by fear or coin, betrayed Arminius's plans, laying bare the enemy's positions. At dawn, Germanicus struck. Roman forces crossed the Visurgis with a blend of boats and brute strength, their discipline a stark contrast to the wilds around them. Shields locked in the fabled testudo formation, they advanced as an impenetrable wall of iron and will, a living fortress that no arrow could pierce. When the Germans charged, their war cries tearing through the trees they expected to sow panic. Instead, they met Roman order, unyielding and merciless. The first clash was a maelstrom of savagery. Spears crashed against shields, arrows darkened the forest canopy, and the air grew thick with the stench of blood and sweat. Yet Rome's discipline held firm, an anchor in the storm. Germanicus, resplendent in golden armor and a flowing purple cloak, moved among his men like a god of war, his presence a rallying cry that steeled their hearts. Centurions roared commands, their voices cutting through the chaos, and the Roman lines flexed but never faltered. When Arminius unleashed his cavalry, confident in their ability to shatter Rome's flanks, he found himself outmaneuvered. Germanicus had anticipated the move, stationing auxiliaries in the shadows, an ambush to counter the ambushers. The Germanic horsemen, caught in a trap of their own making, were cut down in droves, their charge dissolving into chaos. The battle turned to carnage, the forest floor slick with the blood of the fallen. Arminius's lines crumbled, his coalition shattered. Wounded and desperate, the chieftain fled into the woods, leaving behind a trail of dead and a fractured dream of defiance. For the tribes, it was more than a defeat. It was the shattering of their confidence, the dawning realization that Rome had learned to master the forest that once humbled it. Germanicus stood amidst the aftermath, his legions triumphant, their victory a blazing signal to both friend and foe. Rome was no longer the prey of Germania's wilds. It was the predator, relentless and unstoppable. Yet this was but the opening act of a greater saga. The lost eagles still lay beyond reach, and Arminius, though bloodied, was not broken. What would come next? A deeper plunge into the heart of Germania, where the stakes would rise and the clash of steel would decide the fate of an empire. The tale of Germanicus was unfolding, each victory a step closer to redemption, each battle a chapter in a story that demanded to be followed to its thunderous end. It was almost Teutoburg again. As Caecina's legions withdrew toward the Rhine, they approached a narrow stretch of swampy terrain known ominously as the Long Bridges, a wooden causeway built years earlier across treacherous marshes. And Arminius was waiting. Having partially recovered from his wounds, he had returned to what he knew best: the forest, the mud, the trap. Germanic warriors sabotaged the bridges, flooded the marshes, and maneuvered into position. When the Romans arrived, the terrain was already working against them. Carts sank, formations stretched thin, visibility dropped, fear rose. It felt familiar, too familiar. Then the attacks began, arrows rained from the trees. Screams echoed from the mist. Soldiers began to panic. Memories of Teutoburg clawed at their minds. This was how it had happened before: confusion, collapse, slaughter. But Caecina was not Varus. A hardened veteran, he remained calm. He ordered the abandonment of wagons, the construction of emergency fortifications, and the formation of a defensive perimeter. That night, as torches burned and enemies tested the walls, Caecina had a dream. Varus, bloodied and broken, reaching out from the marsh to drag him down. He woke trembling but resolute. "We are Romans," he told his officers. "We do not die in fear." At dawn, he flipped the script. Instead of retreating, the legions launched a surprise attack. Formed in wedges, they charged the unsuspecting Germans. Caecina led from the front, his sword, his voice, his defiance cutting through the morning fog. The Germans, expecting helpless prey, found fury instead. Arminius was wounded again, dragged away by his guards. His plan had failed. The ambush became a retreat. The trap turned into a turning point. The legions escaped. Bloodied, yes, but alive, and something more. They had proven that even when cornered, even in the worst terrain, Rome could endure, could adapt, could win. Teutoburg had nearly repeated itself. Instead, it had been reversed. It was more than metal. It was memory, it was pride. One of the lost eagles, rumored to belong to Legio XIX, had been spotted deep in Angraverii territory. A fortress atop a hill, encircled by sharpened logs, stood guard over it. The locals swore it was inside. Germanicus didn't hesitate. He surrounded the fortress and ordered a siege. The defenders, knowing what they possessed, refused surrender. They would rather burn than give back Rome's soul. So Germanicus gave them fire. Assault ramps rose, catapults hurled flaming stones, arrows rained down, the forest around the fortress crackled with heat and hatred. Day by day the walls blackened, still the defenders held. Until the final day, Roman legions advanced in tortoise formation, shields locked, steps synchronized. Ladders slammed against smoldering wood. The fighting was brutal, Romans falling, rising, climbing again. The defenders, trapped, fought like ghosts guarding a sacred relic, and then one man broke through. Marcus Ventidius, a non-commissioned officer from Campania, reached the top. Covered in soot, bleeding, he forced a foothold. Behind him, a wave of legionaries surged. The fortress cracked, resistance crumbled. The last warriors barricaded themselves inside the central hut where the eagle stood. The Romans set it ablaze. Smoke curled from its windows. Screams echoed, then silence. Ventidius entered. Moments later he emerged, his armor scorched, his breath ragged, but in his hands, held high above his head, was the eagle, blackened by smoke, scarred by time, but unmistakable. The legion roared. Men who had seen comrades die, who had buried bones in silence, now wept aloud. The past had been touched, reclaimed, healed. Germanicus took the eagle gently, kissed the metal, and handed it to its knee. The final reckoning came on the plains of Idus-Tavazo. Germanicus had blood, momentum, and the recovered eagle. Arminius had desperation, fury, and one last chance. Both knew the war would not end with words, only with steel. The battlefield was wide, open, ideal for Roman tactics. Forests flanked the edges, but this was not Teutoburg. Germanicus had chosen the ground, and he had learned. Arminius assembled warriors from every tribe still willing to fight. They sang war chants, beat shields, painted faces. Rome may have won battles, but they believed they could still win the war. At dawn, the air trembled with anticipation. Germanicus rode before his legions, 30,000 strong. His voice cut through the morning mist. Today we avenge our brothers. Today Rome shows the world why it rules. The clash began with a storm of projectiles, javelins, arrows, slingstones. Then came the charge. Rome moved like a machine, shield against shield, step by step. A tide of iron. The Germans met them with a fury born of fear. Their line was wild, chaotic, loud, but no match for Roman precision. Arminius, red cloak flaring, spear in hand, led a furious assault on the center. His warriors formed a wedge, trying to reach Germanicus himself. For a moment they broke through. The two commanders came within meters, glimpses in the chaos. Arminius hurled a spear. A Roman aide intercepted it with his body. Before Arminius could strike again, Germanicus's guards surged forward, forcing the German back. The charge had failed, and with it the Germanic line broke. Retreat became rout. The forest that had once protected them now became their cage. Roman cavalry cut off escape routes. The field turned red with blood. Arminius, wounded again, barely escaped. Behind him, the empire he had defied stood victorious. Eagles high, standards unbroken. The war was not over, but the myth of Germanic invincibility had died at. Rome had its revenge, but not its conquest. Germanicus continued his campaign, punishing rebellious tribes, securing territory, chasing shadows. But as summer faded, the forests grew darker, wetter. The cost of holding Germania grew heavier. Then came the storm. As the legions prepared to return across the North Sea, nature turned against them. Tempests wrecked Roman ships, drowning hundreds, more than any single battle had claimed. The message from the gods was clear: enough. Tiberius, ever